Hey, welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you have your own question you want answered on a future episode, head over to leadingworshipwell.com/realtalk and you can submit it there. Got some good questions as always this week. Let's talk about it. Hey man, super thankful for you and the encouragement you provide. I am an MD music director for my church, and one of the troubles I have with my team is knowing how to encourage and develop people who aren't particularly good at a playing/singing level that I would say they're ready to serve on the team yet. But I don't want to tell someone no. I want to give them tools and tips to help them get better. Do you have any particular advice in that respect? This comes back to a hidden response that I don't think that people know that they can give when somebody wants to join the worship team. I think a lot of people think it's either a yes or a no. But my preferred answer, if the answer is not yes when somebody wants to join my worship team, is not no. It is in the middle. It is not yet. And so I think that that's what you are talking about here, where you have these people who want to join the worship team and you're like, they could be on the worship team at some point, but they need to develop a little bit more. And so the answer that you give them is not yet. And then what do you do? And that's what you're getting at here. And so for me, if I have addressed that they are not yet musically ready to serve on the team, then I give them feedback. I give them 2 or 3 things that they need to work on. So if it's a vocalist, I'm like, hey, your timing was kind of off during the singing portion of your audition, or you were kind of flat in a couple of parts here, and I just feel like you're not quite ready to be on the worship team yet and serve regularly. So first step is make sure that you give them actionable feedback, things that they can actually work on. And don't just tell them, hey, I don't think you're ready to be on the team yet, but give them things that they can actually work on. If it is a guitarist, tell them, you're still fumbling between the chords a little bit. And so I think that you could focus on that. So that's the first thing, is give them an action plan of things that they can work on. Now, I will give you the cynical Spencer answer, because in my mind, if you give them things that they can work on, like actionable things that they can work on, then in today's day and age, there is no reason that somebody cannot pursue excellence in those areas. And I say that cynically because that's how I learned how to play guitar. I got on YouTube and taught myself, or I got on the internet and taught myself. So I tell you that because I want to remove some of the pressure from you. Before I put it back onto you, I want to remove some of the pressure from you that it is completely your responsibility to develop up these musicians to serve in your worship ministry. I think that we have our own responsibility if we desire to serve in the worship ministry, the musical worship ministry, then it is our responsibility, somebody who wants to join your team's responsibility, to get to that level where they can serve. They should be putting in the work on their own to get to that level. So that's sort of the cynical answer that I give you to take a little bit of pressure off of you. But let's talk about things that you can actually do to help them. The first and easiest way kind of relates to what I just talked about, but you put the responsibility back on them, but you do it in a way where you say, here are some resources that you can use to help you improve. So find those YouTube channels for them. There's like a million guitar YouTube channels nowadays. Point them to one of those channels and say, watch this video and watch this video and work on these things. So that's the first low maintenance way that you can do it, is just pointing them to helpful resources that will help them improve. If it's a vocalist, I love the Worship Vocalist YouTube channel. Tons of great videos on there. I'll link that down in the description below. Now let's move to the next level from that, where it's still not you doing the hands-on stuff. But if they are a bass player, ask the bass player on your team if they would show them some things outside of your worship rehearsal, and they could raise them up and teach them and help them with what they need help on. If you have a vocalist who's having trouble singing, match them up with a vocalist on your team. And I tell you this to multiply your ministry so that it's not just everything's flowing through you and you need to handle every situation that comes up and develop every person individually. So match them up with other people on your worship team, and I think that that can multiply your ministry. And then finally, to the last stage, that is where it is you meeting with these people one-on-one. And sometimes that's what it takes. I'm meeting with someone regularly one-on-one right now. They play a different instrument than I play. I don't really know much about the keyboard, but I know enough musically to help guide them and point them in the right direction. So sometimes it takes rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, and meeting with them one-on-one and spending, the 45 minutes to an hour every week for the next month pouring into this person. Sometimes that's the only way. How do you deal with uncommitted members in a team? They only come for Sunday service. No midweek service, no rehearsals, etc. You kick them off your team. No, I'm just kidding. It's not quite that harsh, but maybe that is the answer. If somebody is uncommitted to your team, what do you do? Or not to your team, but fulfilling the responsibilities that it takes to be a worship leader, what do you do? First of all, I always say this, but make sure that you have actually addressed the uncommittedness of the worship team member. A lot of times we always complain about things. We never actually address it to the person. We just talk to the other worship team members and complain about them behind their back at our worst. Or we talk about it to other people in our church, or other ministry leaders, and vent to them. Or we vent to our spouse, or we vent to our other worship leader friends, or we vent in a Facebook group, or we vent in a YouTube comment. But we never actually address the problem. Like, we've tricked ourselves into thinking that we have talked about this problem over and over again, but we've never addressed it with the person who it's actually a problem with. So, address it with the person. A sub point under that, if I was writing a blog post, would be make sure that you actually have a concrete code of conduct to point them to and say, when you join the worship team or as a worship team member, these are the things that we live up to, and I feel like you haven't been living up to this. We've talked about how if you aren't at rehearsal during the week, then you can't play on Sunday. And in addition to that, if that is your expectation that you have set, which I think is a reasonable expectation, then it's your responsibility to enforce those expectations. If somebody isn't at rehearsal, if they aren't at your midweek service, if they only show up on Sunday, the conversation is pretty easy if you have put in the proper things in place beforehand. You say, these are the things that need to happen for you to play on a Sunday. You did not do those things, and therefore you cannot play on Sunday. Now, let's say that you don't have those things in place. What do you do now? Well, now you have to take a little bit of the responsibility because you've let it get to this point where this uncommitted worship team member you have allowed to take root in your worship team and you haven't addressed it. So what can you do to slowly move them to where they need to be? Number one, set the expectation today. Set the expectation at your next worship rehearsal. We have to get these expectations in place because if we never set the expectation, we can never hold people to the expectation. So don't just let the expectation be in your head. Communicate it regularly to your team so that you can hold them to it. And then don't just spring it on them and say, hey, if you're not at rehearsal on Wednesday night, then you can't play on Sunday morning. Tell it to them multiple times and say, this is starting this coming month, in the month of December or whenever it is, we are going to be moving towards this. And that gives them heads up so that they can adjust course. And then when they don't show up for rehearsal, then you tell them, hey, we're doing this now. I've told you about it multiple times in advance. You weren't at rehearsal during the week, and so you can't play this Sunday. That's how I would go about it if I haven't set the expectations in advance. How do you practically put limitations on your personal access with team members, pastors, etc.? I'm a volunteer that oversees our creative teams, and I'm contacted via text and telephone about ministry stuff all days of the week, all hours of the day and evening. I've even been on vacation and gotten texted about ministry stuff that starts like, hey, I know you're on vacation, but hoping you can clarify, insert ministry issue here. I know that boundaries are important, and I always respect my teammates and pastors when it comes to office hours and family time, but trying to help others understand those boundaries when it comes to myself has proved to be challenging. I need to be able to be home or on vacation and have ministry responsibilities turned off so I can fully focus on my family. Any advice is appreciated. The struggle of being in ministry, where emergencies seem to pop up every day, don't they? And people text you, and it's always the smallest stuff that's not actually an emergency. And so we get these texts at all hours of the night. I've been there. I've gotten the text. And the way that I have dealt with it is realizing that the pressure that I feel to respond to the texts and the phone calls is probably 75% in my head and only 25% from other people, which is actually really good news because that means that it's something that you can control. All you have to do is change your thought process about how you respond to things. And what I mean by that is that we tell ourselves that because this person texted me, they want an immediate response right now. When in reality, if you just didn't text back until the next day, what's going to happen? That person will be like, oh, this person just texted back when they had time. So I think a lot of the times this pressure that we feel, at least this is what I've felt in the past, is that the pressure that we feel is not from other people. It is a pressure that we put on ourselves because we think it's what other people think. We think that other people expect an immediate response. And maybe sometimes they do, but do they deserve an immediate response? No, they do not. This device has given people instant access to us. At a moment's notice, a notification can pop up on the screen and ruin our entire night. And so the problem is not necessarily that people are reaching out to us at all hours of the night. The problem is that we tell ourselves that they deserve an immediate response. And I would like us to start thinking about communication on this device as not just email, but postal mail. And I say that because I probably could have used to say email, but now we have email on our phone and we get notifications on our phone that we got an email, and our email has become our text messaging. We need to view it as somebody coming by our office with a note and putting it on the desk. And what that means is that if I am in the office from 9 to 5, after 5 o'clock, if you lay a note on my desk, I am not going to see it, and you are not going to get a response until the next morning. Now, if the messages we received actually happened in that way, then what would the expectation be of the person who put it there? They wouldn't expect you to answer it until you got back into the office the next day, right? And at that, they would not expect an immediate response either. They would expect you to get to it whenever you can. That is how life works. But for some reason, we think that everybody needs instant access to us, and just because something popped up on my phone, I need to answer it right away. And this is something that I'm passionate about because I have felt the effects of this over and over again, and I feel that pressure from people that we need to answer things instantly, but it is not actually there, I don't think, many times. People will wait if you make them wait, and they will probably be fine with it. There are messages I haven't responded to for a couple days, and then I text them back and people are just like, thank you. And you know what? I don't really care if they're disappointed or not, because those are unrealistic expectations that I need to respond to everything instantly. So that is the first thing. I say that because I think that that's the biggest thing. A lot of these pressures are internal pressures and not external pressures. It's how we are falsely perceiving things. Now, some practical things you can do. For the love of God, turn off the push notifications from Instagram, from Facebook, from your email. That is the first thing. You should not be seeing those things at all hours of the day. Turn them off. If you need to see them, they're still there. You just click on the app, but you do not need to be interrupted. Nothing is that important that will come across from Instagram, Facebook Messenger, or email. If people are using those avenues of communication for an important thing, then that's on them. They need to find a new avenue of communication because those are not appropriate methods of communicating important matters that need to be addressed urgently. So turn push notifications off. I'm begging you, please, it will save your life. You should not have 37 push notifications on your phone every time you look at your phone. No wonder we're all anxious and going insane. Number 2, I do not have this on me at all times. And I understand some people, like if you have a family, right? Like you want to be in touch with your kids and your spouse. I don't have those things, so I can probably get away with it a little bit more, but I'm just telling you, there's been so much freedom in leaving this in another room for 2 hours sometimes. Treat not just the apps on your phone as I check them when I need them, but treat your phone as something as I check it when I need it. I don't know if you know this, but how long has it been now? probably 7,500 years at least. No, 7,900 years, or I don't know, since the beginning of human existence, people have survived. And they have not had instant access to other people in the world. They have not been connected, even with their family members, and people have survived. So, put your phone down. People don't need instant access to you all the time. Just try it one day. One day a week. On Mondays from 9 to 11, I'm going to leave my phone in another room, and I'm going to work on whatever I need to work on. Now, you're talking about with your family. If your entire family, everybody that you care about and love, is in the room with you, leave your phone in another room. That is no longer an excuse that my kid is out wherever and I need to know when to pick them up and they're going to text me. So identify those moments, leave your phone in another room. And then the final practical piece of advice is this app right here, or something similar to it. It's called App Block, and what it does is it blocks apps. And so what I like about it is that I can set up times here. All of those are times that I've set up to block these apps. And so I'm not distracted by Facebook or Instagram from 9 to 12 in the morning every day. During the nights, I block email, I block some other things that I use for leading worship well, and during the weekend, I block the same things as well. And so that keeps me from working at night. You do not need to check your email after 5 o'clock. Nothing comes into your email inbox after 5 o'clock that needs to be answered until the next morning. And if it does, once again, that person is wrong who sent it to you, because that is not how you communicate those things with people. So I know that was like a million things, but this is something that I'm passionate about because it drives me crazy, because it has driven me crazy in the past. So try some of those things and free yourself from your own expectation that people are expecting you to respond to everything instantly. Oh, and then one more thing is, if that is you and those things still do not work and people do get upset, even though that's only like 25% of the problem, 75% of the problem is our own thoughts of what things should be like. But if people do get upset, set the boundaries with them. And all you have to do, you don't have to be mean about it, and I've told people this before, tell them, if you text me or call me after 5 p.m., or whenever your work hour is that you want to be done, you will not get a response until the next morning. And if people do not respect that, then they are the unhealthy ones, not you. And you don't have to bow to their unhealthiness and their expectations that are unreasonable. Now that I've just saved your mental health and your life by teaching you how to control your life instead of having your phone control you, you might be freed up to finally work on improving your worship leading. So check out down in the description below the link to the free audio training I put together called 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading. In that training, I will teach you 5 things that are super simple to do, but most people don't do them. You just have to know them and make the effort to do them before you lead this Sunday, and they will instantly improve your worship leading. So check that out in the description below. Also, if you have your own question you want answered on a future episode of Real Talk, head over to leadingworshipwell.com/Real Talk and submit your question there. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Till I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.